Hi, 大家好，我是思婷. Hi guys, it's Kristen. If you're not familiar with our channel, I am married to a Chinese man whose name is Zhiyi, and we are 中美家庭三国记. Today's video, you will notice he is not here, it's only me. Because I'm going to talk a little bit about Chinese, Mandarin Chinese, how I learned, how I'm continuing to learn, and yeah, some of my favorite tips and tricks and some recommendations. So let's get started. First, I'll talk about how I got to where I am in my Chinese level. I started with just an app, actually. It's one that I really recommend. It's called Hello Chinese. And having tried Duolingo and Lingo Deer, just to be super honest, I hated Duolingo. I didn't find it useful at all, and when I came across Hello Chinese, I really preferred the way that they structured the lessons. Duolingo, I feel, gives you a lot of like whole phrases right from the beginning because I guess they're just assuming that you want to start using full sentences even if you don't really know what they mean. Like, you may know what they translate to, but you don't know what each individual word means in that sentence. I really don't prefer to learn that way. I like to be able to look at a sentence, pull it apart, and use the pieces elsewhere. So Hello Chinese was really a better fit for that. But it does feel slower in the beginning because you start with the absolute basics and some really kind of, what a lot of us would consider quite boring lessons in the beginning. But when you do move on to full sentences, you just have a better foundation of understanding what the words you're actually using are and how they function in the structure of the sentence. So Hello Chinese is not paying me at all. I wish they would. Hey, Hello Chinese, if you want to sponsor a video, give me a call. But I really recommend it. I used Hello Chinese as my primary form of learning for about 6-7 months. That got me up to about HSK4 level. Once I reached basically the end of that app, there is actually like a ceiling where they don't have lessons at a higher level. Once I got close to reaching that point, I thought, oh man, I really need a proper teacher. So I looked around online and I found really the course that made the most sense for us was the Confucius Institute. I know they're in the news a lot. Confucius Institute tends to be kind of at the middle of some of the political tensions between the US and China. I can only speak to my personal experience. At the Groningen University Confucius Institute, where I attended my classes, I had an absolutely wonderful time. My teacher was great, the classes were great, the prices are unbelievably low. Yeah, so I can only really recommend it based on my own experience. Even if you're not able or not interested in actually taking a course from the Confucius Institute, I will say that the books that come with the courses, your kind of standard HSK 1 through 6, are really great. They're laid out very logically. The way they introduce new concepts and the order in which you learn new concepts and new words feels very organic. It doesn't feel forced. So yeah, I mean, you can just hop onto Amazon and buy one of those books and even just go through it yourself. A lot of them come with audio CDs and stuff, and you can find a lot of resources online for free that are connected with those HSK books. One other thing that I used at that time and still use on occasion is a website called Italki. So on Italki, you can go and find a one-on-one language teacher. Some of you guys may not know this, I also take Korean lessons regularly, and my Korean teacher is also on Italki. And as far as my Chinese, I used Italki and continue to use Italki as more of a supplement and a conversation practice. So I have 2 or 3 different teachers that I kind of rotate, and literally we just chat for half an hour in Chinese. And that's something I do in between my more intense study sessions, just so I can yeah, really learn how to speak more naturally, get a feeling for the way the language is truly used. Because the only other person in my life who I can practice with is my husband, who is wonderful and lovely and doing his best. But it will really change the way you progress in your speaking skills if you are able to practice with a trained teacher, because they are going to point out specific mistakes. They're going to be able to help you correct those mistakes in a very efficient way, more so than maybe just talking with like your friend or your significant other. So also not being paid by Italki, but again, Italki, give me a call if you want to sponsor a video. It's just a service that I use that I really recommend. So now we'll talk a little bit about how I like to study. Take these approaches however you like. If you find something useful, great, please use it. If you think something is dumb and a waste of time, that's totally fine too. So basically, the way I have my learning notebook set up is, this is a trick I learned back in school where you divide your paper in half. So on the left are going to be your main ideas, right? And on the right side is going to be where you kind of explain it a little more. And here you'll notice I have different highlighter colors. These highlighter colors, you may find this strange, but the highlighter colors refer to where I learned the word or phrase. Because for a lot of us who are self-studying, we're not only getting it from one resource, right? So I use YouTube videos, I use Chinese language TV shows, I use apps, sometimes it's music. So when I'm looking back at things that I've learned a month ago, 2 months ago, I may be like, oh my God, what was the word for ignore? And I can't remember what it was, but I remember I was watching a Chinese variety show the last time I saw it. And I know that my Chinese variety show highlighter color is green. So when I'm flipping through my old notes, I'm looking for green. And that's how I can find some of those words more quickly and more easily. So I think that's quite specific to me. I've never heard of anyone else doing it like that, but I have found that a very helpful way to study from a lot of different sources. The other notebook that I use is my review notebook. I really think reviewing is where you will kind of make or break your language learning journey, because anybody can copy down a bunch of vocabulary, anybody can copy down a bunch of sentences, copy down a bunch of grammatical concepts, but if you're not reviewing regularly and if you're not reviewing efficiently, then information's never gonna stick, right? So for me, what works is keeping a separate notebook that is only for practice and review. So in my review notebook, I mostly spend time copying down full sentences. I find that to be a much more effective way to review as opposed to just writing down words or like fragments of sentences, because the more context I can give my brain, the more likely I am to remember a piece of information, especially if I can give it multiple types of context. So you'll see on one side of the page is literally just a wall of Chinese. This notebook is not meant to be looked at later on, honestly. This notebook is just meant for me to scribble down things as I'm reviewing them elsewhere. So I have this on one side of the page, and on the other side of the page is where I do my more like just vocabulary practice. And here you can see I've kind of created my own table, as it were. One suggestion I would give when it comes to this type of study for Chinese characters is don't make this line and then fill it all in at once, in one sitting. I have seen that on a lot of study videos on YouTube for beginners, for Chinese or like Japanese as well. And I guess if it works for you, then obviously that's fine, go ahead and do it. But I personally find that to be not effective at all, unless you are also going back and redoing that. But to write down a single Chinese character to write it 50 times in a row, fill a whole page in one sitting, and then not look at it for a week, I don't really think is gonna work for you. It doesn't work for me. So what I do, you can see this one's full because it's an old page, but I'll write down a new word. I usually limit myself to, I think it's like 14 or 15 new words at a time. And I'll write it down once, maybe twice on the first day. And then the next day or 2 days later, I'll write it down again once or maybe twice. And then a day or a couple days later, I'll write it down once or maybe twice. And what I do as I'm moving on is then I will kind of challenge myself by covering the previous characters and only looking at the pinyin that I have listed here. So then I can look at the pinyin and create the character from my own memory. Hopefully by the end of the table, I should be able to do that consistently. That is the method that has worked the best for me as far as memorizing characters. Of course, handwriting characters is not necessarily a skill that you need in Chinese because we're all typing and using our phones, and the predictive text in the Chinese keyboard is really good. But I think it is important, at least in the beginning, to let that information sink in as best as possible. So that is how I study. Like I said, if you think it's useful, great. If you don't think it's useful, then just ignore it and listen to somebody else. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about a tool I've been using recently because YouDao was kind enough to send over their dictionary pen. This is the Dictionary Pen 3. It is the latest in their line of dictionary pens. And I have to say, this little thing is so useful. It's small, it's easy to carry around, it's got this nice little touch screen that you can use. You can set it for English or Chinese, and it's got a lexicon library over 2.75 million. I cannot imagine encountering a word that this dictionary cannot recognize and translate. And it's just really easy to use. If you're looking to translate a single word, all you do is tap it. And you can also do multiple lines, even multiple sentences, and it's going to give you the whole thing translated with the pronunciation.
为什么校长决定这次活动继续由李老师负责?
I really love it when I'm reading in Chinese. I don't want to stop my workflow to click over to a different app, try to write in the character I'm not sure what it is. It takes a long time, it really pulls me out of what I'm doing, but if I've got the dictionary pen close by, I can just tap the word, get the definition and the pronunciation, and move on. This thing even recognizes handwriting. It recognizes my husband's handwriting, which is insane. So for anyone trying to learn English or learn Chinese, I definitely recommend it. It's a great little tool. And if you guys are interested, you can look down in the description box. We're gonna have some links for you for more information and a discount code. So if you're interested, go ahead and take a look down there and we'll have all the info for you. Thanks again to YouDao for sending it over. And yeah, I hope you guys like it. If you get one, let us know what you think. All right, so the next part of the video is tips and tricks. So the number one tip, trick, piece of advice that I have, and I really think this works not just for learning Chinese, not just for learning English, but really for learning much of anything, is the best kind of studying is the kind of studying that you will actually do. If there's a particular type of study that you just hate, it's not going to work out for you in the long run. You really have to be honest with yourself. What you enjoy doing, what is going to be motivating for you, and what is going to be so boring that you just end up giving up. Especially those of us who are learning as adults, who are doing self-study, it's really important to kind of consistently check in with yourself and see what methods of study are working, what methods of study are working less effectively, what you are enjoying spending time doing, and kind of look at it all and evaluate what's working for you. That's going to be the most important part. The second tip, and this one is specifically for speaking, is you gotta just decide to be confident. For me, that's something I really struggle with. Especially because a lot of times when I speak Chinese, it's to my husband's parents and I want to impress them and I want them to think I'm smart and cool. So I get really nervous about saying the wrong thing or sounding silly, and I know that holds me back. So one of the biggest things that has helped my progress is really challenging myself to let go of the embarrassment, to convince myself that I'm confident, and to just open my mouth and talk even if I make mistakes. If you have tips for how to build confidence in speaking a new language, please leave them in the comments below. I think that's something we all really struggle with all the time. Next up is some of my favorite apps. Of course, I talked about Hello Chinese. Again, they're not paying me, but I just really love this app, and I think it's the best one out there. I also really recommend Pleco. I'm sure a lot of you use Pleco for both Chinese to English and English to Chinese. Those are the two main apps I use for learning that I really recommend. If you guys have any others, please let me know. I'm always looking to kind of expand my horizons. Outside of learning apps, I really like watching Chinese language TV. One thing I will say, I've seen this tip a lot from teachers for beginners, to watch kids shows in your target language. I don't find this to be helpful personally at all. If you enjoy watching Peppa Pig, that's great. You can absolutely do that. But Peppa Pig is not a show I would be watching in English, so why would I want to watch it in Chinese? I'm not really sure why that's such a popular piece of advice. If that's helpful for you, obviously do it. But I find it much more effective to watch shows and movies in Chinese that I am already interested in. So, you know, shows meant for adults, or at the very least teenagers. You guys know that I'm quite a big fan of Wei Shenvi. So watching their behind the scenes content, interviews, variety shows has been really helpful for me.
我说你喜欢学习中文，对不对？
对。
认不认真？
我很认真。
对，谢谢。
Personally, the most useful content that I watch in Chinese is going to be variety programs. Happy Camp, Keep Running. These are shows where you really do get a sense of how the language is used. There are filler words, people are talking over each other, people stutter and stammer. Oh, and another show I liked, which I think ended up not being very popular, was Shanghai Share Life, which was basically the Chinese version of Terrace House. So it's really chill, but it's also in Chinese. And again, it's normal people, no script. So you do get such a great sense of using slang and how people talk when they're feeling awkward and all kinds of things like that. And of course, my favorite YouTubers, the two that I watch regularly are Grace Mandarin and Shuo Chinese. So I find these two channels to be really useful. Their videos are cute, they're informative, and they typically have very useful everyday kind of tips, vocabulary, and grammatical concepts. There's so many resources on YouTube. If you guys know of any other channels that you'd recommend, please leave them in a comment down below. I'm always really interested in finding more. So for the end of the video, I'm gonna leave you with one last piece of advice, which is a less fun piece of advice, but that is, there are no shortcuts. Unfortunately. And I speak from experience because I went really hardcore. I was studying 1 to 2 to 3 hours per day for close to 9 months, and my progress was off the charts. More recently, we got super busy. We've got this move coming up. I'm not studying nearly as much as I should be, and I've even noticed that I'm backsliding a little bit. You know, it's not that fun of a piece of advice, but that's the truth. There are no shortcuts. You just gotta do the work. And hopefully you can find a way to make it fun, to make it motivating for yourself, and to make it something that you look forward to every day, as opposed to something that stresses you out. So I hope this was a little bit helpful for you, answered some questions for those of you who are curious about how I learned and what I'm up to now. Thank you so much for all your support. I actually really love it when you guys comment with corrections on my Chinese, when you point out mistakes that I make, because if you don't tell me, then I'll keep making the same mistakes and nobody wants that. So I'm really appreciative of you guys, and obviously this channel has been such a motivation for me to continue working hard on Chinese, and it's made me feel so encouraged and supported in my language learning journey. I'm hoping once we have completed this move, things will settle down a little and I can get back to my regular study schedule. I promise I haven't given up. So yeah, stay tuned. We've got a lot of fun videos coming, and hopefully you'll see even better and more Chinese from me in the future. Thanks again for your support. We'll see you next time.